professor. My name is Susana Suárez, and with my partner Diego Salazar, we're going to talk about England. We're going to talk about Henry VII, Henry VIII, his wives, um, and among other topics. So we're going to start. Okay, so we're going to start with Henry VII restores England order to England. First, the book told us that the English Renaissance began after the Battle of Bosworth. This marks the end of the Middle Ages in Britain. Here, King Henry VII, as known as Henry Tudor, concentrating to restore the order and prosperity to England. In order to encourage trade, he passed rules mandating merchants to ship their goods to England ships. Okay, now Henry VIII break with Rome. Since Catherine of Aragon was unable to give birth to a child for the crown, Henry VIII asked the Pope to dissolve their marriage. Henry was sure that this is going to happen because of Thomas Wolsey. So he thought that this is going to happen because of Thomas Wolsey. However, at the time, Rome was taken by the Spanish forces, and Charles V had the Pope as a prisoner. Since this, Henry started to go to monasteries and church to declaring the English Church to be free of Roman rule. However, even though they broke with Rome, Henry was still a Catholic who persecuted Lutherans. Edward VII. Here, the Anglican Church renounced many Roman Catholic practices and ideas during the Edward VII mandatory. So there started to be a more genuinely Protestant outlook. They have a book that was the Book of Common Prayer that says all the Anglican beliefs and practices and ideas. This book was first published in 1549 by Archbishop Carmen. Next is Bloody Mary. The restoration of Roman Catholic Church in England was Queen Mary's first lifelong goal. However, she became unpopular after getting married to King Philip II of Spain. Before this, she was in power for barely 5 years. However, during those years, 300 Protestant leaders were burned in a stake, giving her the nickname of Bloody Mary. Now, Queen Elizabeth. Queen Elizabeth I was the half-sister of Mary I, the Queen of England, and was the daughter of Anne Boleyn. Queen Elizabeth I established the Anglican Church as the recognized religion in her kingdom. Under her power, the English created cutting-edge ships design, as well as first navigational and maritime warfare strategies under her rule. The Elizabethan Age. During Elizabeth I's power ruled, English poetry and play were flourished and were recognized. During those ages, Edmund Spencer wrote a book about that was called The Fair Queen, and is considered the keystone of English Renaissance. Also, popular morality and passion plays were considered a highly creative work by, by Elizabethan dramatists. Last but not least of this first part of the presentation, we have the end of Tudor dynasty. Here, James Stuart, that was Mary's Queen of Scots' son, was offered the throne after Elizabeth died in 1603. He became to be James III of England, the first ruler of Stuart dynasty, and he joined his previous titles as King James VI of Scotland and King James I of England.
Hello, Professor. Now I will talk about Sir Thomas More. Okay, he was also known as Saint Thomas More. He was an English lawyer, a writer, and advisor to King Henry VIII. He is famous for being the most eminent Renaissance humanist along with Erasmus. More was a very close friend of Henry VIII, but he was beheaded in 1535 because one day Henry asked him to recognize him as supreme head of the English Church, but he refused to do it since he was loyal to the Roman Catholic Church. More wrote a book called Utopia that describes an imaginary government where tolerance, justice, and equality is what they work for. He also wrote the biography of Richard III, and there are songs, novels, plays, movies that have as a main subject to Thomas More. To Catholic people, Thomas More is the patron saint of politicians. Now let's move to Elizabeth the Virgin. King Henry VIII was disappointed and also angry when Anne gave birth to Elizabeth, since he decided to have a male child. Elizabeth spent much of her youth learning to be discreet and not to get involved in political problems or issues. Elizabeth had a half-sister called Mary, who reigned during a time. Elizabeth used to attend the Catholic Church, even though she had more of an inclination to Protestantism. Protestants wanted to place Elizabeth on the throne and get rid of Mary, and for this, Elizabeth had to be imprisoned and with fear of execution. Although all this happened, Mary finally named Elizabeth to be the heir to the throne. And when she died, that's how it happened. Elizabeth had to face severe challenges as she began the reign. One of the most challenging situations that she had to face was the problem of religion. Since she was a Protestant by convention, and she was convinced, like her father Henry, that there should be an English national church. However, she didn't want to see anyone being chased for their beliefs. In 1570, the Pope said that Elizabeth was a heretic and asked the Catholic people not to obey her. There were plots to kill her and place her cousin Mary, Queen of Scots, on the throne. Another challenge to Elizabeth was the power of Spain. Spain's Philip II um, tried to maintain peace with England, proposing marriage to her, but she refused. Philip II sent an army to kill her, and so she would be replaced by Mary, Queen of Scots. In 1587, Elizabeth ordered Mary's execution, and after that, Philip finally decided to send a military expedition against England. Mm, the Spain armade um, approximated to the coast of England in 1588, and Elizabeth went to Tilbury, which is located along the coast, to inspire her fellows to defend their country. The words that she said were, "I have the body of a weak and feeble woman, but I have the heart and stomach of a king of England." She was admired by many men and foreign people because of her strength of character. She received many proposals of marriage, but she never got to get married. For that reason, she was called the Virgin Queen. Something that she did claim was that she was married to the English people. She was not very popular when she lived. However, later generations of Englishmen think of the reign of the Queen as the golden age of England. Well, now let's move to Francis Drake. He was born in 1540 and died in 1596. He was a seaman who served as Queen Elizabeth's vice admiral in the fight against the Spanish armada. He's recognized by capturing Spanish treasure ships and attacking Spanish coastal towns in the New World prior to the outbreak of war with Spain. And he did it along with Sir John Hawkins. The Queen said that she had no connections with Drake, but she secretly encouraged him. The Golden Hind was the first British vessel to enter the Pacific Ocean. Drake is recognized or remembered here in Latin America for his capture of Cartagena in 1585. It is said that the walls that they are constructed and are very famous and popular and a popular touristic attraction were built so with the intention that if an enemy wanted to threaten the city, they couldn't enter. Drake's attack on Riohacha is mentioned in Gabriel Garcia Marquez's epic novel, 100 Years of Solitude. Drake and Hawkins were among the first to capture Africans and sell them as slaves in the New World. Well, let's talk about the defeat of Spain Armada. King Philip II of Spain was the husband of Queen Mary I of England, and during her reign, he has the title of King Consort of England, even though he didn't have power over the royal or over England. When Mary died, her half sister Elizabeth I ascended to the throne. Relations between England and Spain went down. Elizabeth not only restored the Anglican Church in England, but she also helped the Protestant Dutch in the War of Independence against Spain. The expedition suffered many delays. For example, Francis Drake made a surprise attack on Cadiz and destroyed a number of Spanish ships. Finally, in 1588, a fleet of 130 ships was sent, carrying 800 sailors and 18,000 soldiers to England. On July 19 of the year 1588, the Spanish armada was sighted off the English coast. When Spanish tried to jaw alongside the English ships, the English maintained their distance and fired their cannons. The English captured several enemy ships and forced the rest to sail north. Spanish people or soldiers had nothing to do there anymore, so they went around the coast of Scotland and sailed around Ireland to the west and returned to Spain. While they were sailing around Scotland and Ireland, storms wrecked many of its ships. Those who survived the storm ran out of food and water, and many sailors died of hunger, thirst, and many other diseases. The English people had a great victory for their country and for their Protestant religion. So that's how it happened. So now, finally, let's talk about Sir Walter Raleigh, who was a fashionable nobleman. He was a poet, an adventurer, and he was one of the favorite person the Queen Elizabeth I. He had a very big devotion to Elizabeth, which made him name the colony Virginia in honor of England's Virgin Queen. He is given credits for popularizing the smoking of tobacco. Raleigh is remembered for an incident that probably never happened. And the incident was about that someday the Queen was walking and came across a puddle. So he took off his cloak and set it down at the Queen's feet so that she could step it without getting her royal feet dirty. This story illustrates Raleigh's fame as a supreme example of an English gentleman. And during the reign of James I, Sir Walter Raleigh got engaged in a military expedition against the Spanish, with whom the king was trying to establish peaceful relationships. Raleigh was condemned to death, and just before he was beheaded, he touched the blade of the axe and said, "This is a sharp medicine, but it is a physician for all diseases and miseries." So this was the presentation of my partner and I. So thank you for for watching and listening.
Hi,